line. Do you think that she was ambitious?
No, I think she wishes to be measured against the best. If she was playing tennis, she would be Serena, and that's how competitive this woman would be and can be. She would always be focused on, I'm going to win it.
You remember that right from the start?
Oh, from day one.
Hello, my darlings.
Millennium, she was back in San Francisco, working on cases concerning families and vulnerable children. Her old boss, Louise Rennie, remembers her as driven but generous.
It was a tough job, but by the same token, you had to have a kind heart. One day, Kamala came into my office with an armful of teddy bears, and she said, "Come on, Louise, it's adoption day, and we're going to go over to court. We're going to hand out teddy bears to the children and the families that are doing the adoption, so they'll have a way to remember this occasion." And I thought that was really pretty remarkable.
A soft exterior masked a steely determination. Harris had her sights set on the job of district attorney, a key role prosecuting criminals in San Francisco. She won a bitter election battle, her first political victory.
I will follow the rule of law and enforce the law.
But just 4 months in, the murder of a policeman changed everything.
Police say the two plainclothes officers approached a man who apparently was acting suspicious when that suspect opened fire on both of them.
29-year-old Isaac Espinoza was gunned down by a gang member. Harris chose not to seek the death penalty, in line with her campaign promise not to pursue capital punishment. She announced it at a press conference without warning. The outcry from police officers was furious.
It's a loss that just never goes away.
Tracy McRae is head of the San Francisco Police Union.
He was young, fit.
She says she'll never forgive Harris for her handling of Espinoza's murder.
She didn't speak to the family. She made that decision on her own. And I don't care if she keeps saying, well, someone from my staff. Yeah, no, you didn't do it yourself.
So every time you see her rise to a higher office, it brings back the memories not only of his death, but how she handled his death and the pursuit of justice in the aftermath.
Correct. You keep saying, oh, you work for the victim, but you failed epically in how you treated his widow, Renata, how you treated his mother and father.
Harris has received a majority of union endorsements nationwide, but McRae says she'll never get the backing of the police union in the city where her career began.
Having a female of color, right, rise up to this office, I mean, it's a great thing. But if you can't deliver at home, you're not going to deliver on the world stage. We don't need more hot air, emptiness, talking.
Is that what you think she is?
I think she talks a lot, but when it comes to actually producing and having concrete results, well, where are they?
We did it.
Harris weathered the Espinoza controversy to win another election, becoming the first female and first black attorney general in California, the state's so-called top cop.
Yourselves, please.
It widened the scope of her power, emphasising once more her ability to make friends in high places. Kamala Harris has long-standing relationships in Hollywood. Even when she was living and working in San Francisco, she was forging friendships here with TV producers and movie execs. But it was a meeting in 2013 that proved the most pivotal of all. She was introduced on a blind date to Doug Emhoff, an entertainment lawyer. They were both in their late 40s and married the next year.
Where am I looking? You?
To me, yes, please. Matt Maloney is a doyen of Hollywood reporting. In a previous life as a lawyer, he worked with Emhoff.
He was very smart, very ambitious, very competent lawyer, handled great cases, and it was a pleasure working for him.
Emhoff has 2 children, Cole and Ella, from a previous marriage.
We can barely see you,
Ella,
honey.
turn the light
Turn
back
the light
on.
I did.
Together they've become what Harris describes as a big blended family.
Everybody smile.
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 And then he met Kamala.
This film was made by Doug's son, Cole, and used to promote Harris's campaign.
In 2014, Kamala became Mamala. She took over Sunday night dinners and taught Doug how to actually cook.
It was their way of fighting back at the Trump campaign's casting of Harris as a childless cat lady.
I mean, in Los Angeles, this is normal. I mean, it seems like everyone has a stepmom or, someone has multiple marriages, and it's sort of been seamless.
Harris became friendly with A-list actors like Hilary Swank and Sean Penn. Disney boss Dana Walden was one of her early fundraisers and is now a close confidant.
She cultivated those relationships. She made trips to Los Angeles. She would go to fundraisers here. She would do meet and greets. And she really established herself as somebody that the progressive wing of the Democratic Party could get behind.
That Hollywood support propelled Harris's move to the East Coast, where bigger battles awaited. It was 2016, and a new, unexpected force in politics was in town.
My little godson's tears tonight because we might have elected Donald.
Kamala Harris won a seat in the Senate,
I believe this is that moment in time for our country.
catapulting her to national prominence in Washington, D.C.
Brett Kavanaugh
Mr. Chairman.
to serve as Associate Justice.
Mr. Chairman,
on the
I'd like to be
Supreme Court of
recognized
the
for a
United
question
States.
before we proceed.
Her questioning of Trump appointees to the Supreme Court cuts through the chaos.
They don't want to look up on Election Day.
Simone Sanders is a TV host on political network MSNBC. She was once Kamala Harris's right-hand woman, her press secretary and top aide.
What Vice President Harris, then Senator Harris, did very, very well, which I think was a function of her being an attorney for so long, is that she had very pointed questions, but her questions were so pointed that sometimes they would trip the interviewer up.
Can you think of any laws that give government the power to make decisions about the male body?
I'm happy to answer a more specific question, but
Male versus female.
Ambition growing, Harris threw her hat into the race for president in 2020.
America, we are better than this.
Accused, though, of being too progressive, her campaign faltered early,
I have come to one of the hardest decisions of my life.
and she pulled out before the first primary.
My campaign for president simply does not have the financial resources to continue.
A failure, then a political lifeline.
Your next Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris.
Show me what democracy looks like.
With the backdrop of a raging pandemic and a racial reckoning across America, she was set to become yet another first.
While I may be the first woman in this office, I will not be the last.
President Biden and Vice President Harris, at the time, they were very, I think, responsive to the movement that had emerged. Many things, I think, converged on this moment in 2020 that brought Joe Biden and Kamala Harris that victory.
It was a relationship forged in quarantine. Harris, desperate to impress, but unable to define herself. Often speaking in stock phrases.
What could be unburdened by what had been? What can be unburdened by what has been?
She was accused of flip-flopping on policy. Some said they simply didn't know what she stood for.
A good vice president, one does not know what they do every day, right? It's not the job of the vice president to be out front making policy. And it has been 30 years in America since a sitting vice president has ran for president. The last time this happened was Al Gore.
It's been a campaign like no other. Kamala Harris had just 100 days to tell America and the world who she is. And who is she, really? Well, loyalty, meticulousness, and competitiveness came up in many of my conversations. Her friends and family believe she can be a world leader. But has she convinced enough of this country? A question which will soon be answered. Martha Kellner, Sky News, Los Angeles. 100 days since Joe Biden announced he wasn't seeking re-election, kicking off a sprint for the new Kamala Harris team to convince America she's ready for the Oval Office. Sky's Martha Kellner has been looking at her backstory.
Let's get out there. Let's fight for it. Let's get out there. Let's vote for it. And together, let us write the next great chapter in the most extraordinary story ever told.
By next week, this woman could be America's first female president. But Kamala Harris has been making history for decades. It started in Berkeley, California, a middle-class city on the eastern shore of the San Francisco Bay.
Kamala and I met here in 1970. We were probably between 5.5 or 6 years old.
Carol Porter is Harris's childhood friend and has been part of her life for more than half a century. They grew up at the tail end of the civil rights era. Together they were part of a historic desegregation experiment known as busing.
What they decided to do was have busing go both ways. So they had the affluent white kids from the Berkeley Hills bused here, and they had the black kids and the immigrant kids bused up to the hills where they didn't live. So, I mean, the bus looked like a little United Nations.
Harris's mother, Shamala Gopalan, had emigrated from India to the United States alone, aged 19. Her dream to become a scientist. She met Donald Harris, an economist from Jamaica. They fell in love in the throes of America's battle for racial equality. They had Kamala and her younger sister, Maya. By the time Kamala was 6 and they'd moved to this apartment in Berkeley, her parents had split.
The bottom part was Shelton's daycare, and the top was where Kamala, Shamala, and Maya lived.
Carol drives me along the route their bus took to school.
And this is where the Black Panthers had their breakfast program.
These are the streets where, when Kamala was a child, the militant Black Power organisation, the Black Panthers, formed. Berkeley, a crucible of radical politics.
It was not unusual to see a tank driving up or down the street, that was breaking up, a rally or a protest.
Do you think that had a big impact in who she is and how she leads?
It definitely has an influence. I mean, her being outspoken and being unafraid to make good trouble.
The Harris campaign has highlighted her middle-class upbringing here. Her opponents saying they're exaggerating the facts. Did she work at McDonald's? Because there's this narrative at the moment from the other side that she's not middle class, that there's been inventions in her background.
No, we both grew up in that neighborhood that we just left, which was middle class to lower income neighborhood. We all worked at McDonald's. Kamala worked at McDonald's. I worked at McDonald's. I don't know if you can notice a little bit different neighborhood that we're in now.
Yeah, this feels a lot more upmarket than where you grew up.
It is. And we loved it here. We loved going to school here. And that's where all the buses would stop, right in front of this tree.
At her primary school, Harris is remembered on a mural beside Serena Williams and Anne Frank.
The whole thing, I think I'm holding in a lot. Mm-hmm. There's just so much that's happened, and when you think about it, it does. It can be overwhelming. So,
when you say you're holding it in, what do you mean?
There's just so many emotions around everything that's gone on, and when Trump talked about her not being black. So for me, that's very personal.
Someone who's working very closely on the Trump campaign said that if Kamala Harris gets into the White House, it will smell like curry. How does that make you feel?
First of all, I love the smell of curry. I think it would be lovely for the White House to smell like curry. Why not, And then the next night it smells like pot roast, and the next night it smells like enchiladas.
On the other side of the Golden Gate Bridge is San Francisco, the city which shaped Harris's career. First as a prosecutor, then a politician. In downtown, Sam's Grill and Tavern is an institution. It's also the regular Thursday lunchtime haunt of former San Francisco Mayor Willie Brown. Brown is also a former boyfriend of Kamala Harris.
I was introduced to her at a wedding. My first conversation with her had absolutely nothing to do with politics. She was more focused on her girlfriend's marriage.
They dated between 1994 and 1995. At the time, Brown was 60 and Harris 29. Brown, the most influential politician in the city, and at campaign events, confusion sometimes greeted their relationship. There was obviously a big age gap. How did she deal with that?
Well, I don't think there was ever any question, and I think that there was a great friendship that blossomed into wonderment for me, and I hope wonderment for her.
Their relationship, though, is being used as a battering ram by some on the political right.
It is relevant when a young candidate tries to sleep her way into politics and into power.
Well, we know her first meaningful job in politics was given to her by her boyfriend at the time, who's married, Willie Brown.
How does it make you feel when you hear certain members of the Republican Party suggesting that she exploited her romantic relationship with you to succeed?
Nothing pleases me more, frankly, than knowing how she'll ultimately be measured on her own performance.
By day, Harris was finding her feet in the courtroom as a trial lawyer. By night, she was negotiating San Francisco high society, making the social and political connections that would come to help her down the line. Do you think that she was ambitious?
No, I think she wishes to be measured against the best. If she was playing tennis, she would be Serena, and that's how competitive this woman would be and can be. She would always be focused on, I'm going to win it.
You remember that right from the start?
Oh, from day one.
Few communities have seen the level of drug violence that has...
Harris's legal career began in Oakland, California, as the city was battling the tail end of America's crack epidemic. The cases were brutal: murders, drug violence, and turf wars. By the turn of the millennium, she was back in San Francisco, working on cases concerning families and vulnerable children. Her old boss, Louise Rennie, remembers her as driven but generous.
It was a tough job, but by the same token, you had to have a kind heart. One day, Kamala came into my office with an armful of teddy bears, and she said, "Come on, Louise, it's adoption day, and we're going to go over to court. We're going to hand out teddy bears to the children and the families that are doing the adoption, so they'll have a way to remember this occasion." And I thought